high THC value.
Yeah, and I think we're learning a lot now with concentrates like that too, though, because it really, like, if you take, you take distillate, which is 99% THC or something, it has no light. It's there. There's something there, but without those terps, it just doesn't really do it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's noticeable. And I've had times where I've smoked terps that have less than 50% THC in them, and I get ripped. You know what I mean? So it's well proven.
That's, when I'm choosing variety, that's always on the top of my list, because when I'm breeding, I breed stuff that I like, right? I don't necessarily always grow because the market usually demands something different, but I like to breed for the effect. I want that psychotropic experience, where you have more of a mind expansion to where you can, kind of, for me, most cannabis is like that, but I really like to have that effect that you were talking about with those hazes, where you can really like get into a different mental state. That's what for me is most important. So that's what I look for when I breed. But
so on that, let me ask you guys, which traits do you guys look for when you're breeding? Like some of my guys, like for example, DJ Short, I believe, breeds for psychedelic effect. He wants flashbacks, and so that's what he gets all his. Farmer breeds for, he has lupus. He breeds for medicinal qualities. He heavily believes in purples, and that's what he goes for. Exotic breeds for frost. Let me ask you guys as breeders, what traits do you look for in your males to pass through in your end selections?
I mean, I don't always set with the same trait for each male. A lot of different lines and a lot of different goals. We also find males I'm breeding for terps and concentrates. So, I mean, that's always the way I've been. I giant buds. Most of the time, my biggest buds are not really my favorite.
Male, I take a couple things into account. I take in the flowering time. Pre-flowers and veg are immediately eliminated from the program. I look at the structure and the vigor of those plants. I really look at structure as my main component, because that's usually the thing that, whenever I'm running something, it's usually on more of a commercial scale. So I'm trying to find plants that aren't going to be grow like train wreck, where they're just wild and all over the place. I want uniformity, because the way that...
And train wreck wasn't made because it made you high like you got hit by train wreck? No, it's because your room looked like a train wreck.
Yeah.
There's plants everywhere laying around.
You open the door and go like, yeah, okay, I'll just throw some water in there. It's like, don't like deal with this shit.
Yeah, train wreck, that's what it did. It just grew all over the place. It was really skinny, thin branches, so it would just fall down. It needed a massive amount of support. So I look for
support.
Yeah, I look for structure and vigor for my males. But one of the things that I like to do is I'll take multiple males from a selection, and when I take my female selections, I'll take clones of that, and I'll hit each clone with a different male, and then I'll run whatever, all the different phenos from each male, so I can figure out which is going to pass on the characteristic that I was looking for. So that's one of the things that I'll do in my selection process, which it takes a lot longer. Is one of the reasons why I don't have a lot of constant seed drops, is because I have to go and sift through more of the progeny than if I was just to do a single pollination with a single male.
And it is funny because I do the opposite. I tend to do multiple females at the same height with the one male. Yeah. So you end up with the same bottleneck at one point where you're like, well, I've got 40 of this female mixed in with one male,
But for me, again, always terpenes and effect for personal, but I'm not, again, what I like isn't always what the market wants, so I have to take into consideration things like bag appeal and things like flowering time, because when I have something that I'm bringing to market, it has to be appealing to the masses. I'll do smaller projects with other varieties that might take longer, but I just don't, they're not as attractive to the consumer often, so they're just usually in lower quantities.
Adam?
Yeah, and I think Brandon, it's funny, I like it that you guys do the opposites, that's always good, but I think Brandon's approach is kind of more like mine, where it's multiple males gives you a lot more opportunity to see the direction, which way the plants are going to go. And sometimes it's the opposite of what you think. Like with males, structure is important to me, but actually the terps on the male, like the terp ability, because it seems like you'd think it would be the female, right? Because we're all used to like, oh, I'm smoking a sour diesel. Try to ever get a sour diesel that is like a real sour, because you'll never get it, because it's not so much the female that imparts a lot of times the terps, it's a lot of times the male. And that makes it really hard as a breeder, because we're not smoking the males and we're not able to get those terps clearly in our brain before we're making that cross. So you get a lot of surprises. There's a lot of throwbacks and a lot of weird stuff happens. So when you do it with a multi-pronged sort of male approach, it gives you that ability to kind of get the full spectrum to work with.
And I think that goes back to pheno hunting. Just like you pheno hunt your females, you need to pheno hunt your males. Not, there's going to be the short brother, there's the smart brother.
And a lot harder, because you don't get the consensus of all your. It's not like you can just hand a bunch of people here, check out this male. What are they going to keep it? What's the point? What am I supposed to do with it?
Dozens of males around too is a pain in the ass. Whereas if you got the multiple females, so I mean, it's harder for a lot of people to want to do that, because
but also like testing
you could throw it.
It's easy, because you just give people, like, a lot of times, people like, how do you select? It's like, you just put all the weed on a table and you see what fucking is empty. Like, hey, look at that one's empty. That must be the best weed in the group.
What I've come to realize though too with male plants is that when you hit different varieties with the same male, and then you test all those varieties, you can kind of see the traits that are passed along the male that are consistent. So that's one of the ways, if you take all of those varieties and you do, like with what I do, is I'll hit that same variety with 2-3 different males, and then you can go through all of those multiple different varieties that have been hit with different males, and then you can really see a huge picture of what each type of male has to offer in its genetics.
It's like runts. I keep hearing about this runts female, and I guess she's just a bad bitch. I mean, everything you breed with runts, it comes out with like runts.
Right.
She
So
just overpowers everything.
That's what we're smoking right now. I think Cushman's times runs.
Well, and that's how you know how powerful the male is a lot of the times. If he can overpower that female, that nothing else overpowers. This got some dominant terps to it.
There's many, if you like that and it's a male and it's dominant, then you're good to go. But if you don't, then you got to get rid of that thing, because it's going to cut it. It'll take over everything. It's the Jack syndrome, right? I mean, that's pretty much what happened with Jack, the Harrow strain. I mean, that thing just, if you cross it into anything,
You get jacked.
it's jacked out beyond, like, it just kills everything.
Jack.
And it's just the level of Jack. The way I look at it too is, okay, so the original Jack Harrow strain is an 11 hybrid, right? I was
11 strain.
I worked at Sensi when they were developing it, right? So 11-way hybrid, there's a lot of throwbacks in there, right? And so when I was looking at it, I was like, wait a minute, so this is like, if this was paint and you had 11 colors and you mix them into what color do you get? You get brown, right? So I just call it the brown flavor now, because everything, when you mix too many flavors, and you see that as a lot of breeders are just throwing all this stuff into the mix. At a certain point, you put too much into that mix, and it just ends up coming out like high terpenoline, because that's the strongest terp, it seems like, the dominant terp that will override everything else. And then you end up with and it's funny, because I'll go to a place, somebody will hand me something, I'll smell it, I'll be like, that Jack,
Make sure that they're doing their testing, because we always talk about there are different males and different females. I know many breeders that come to me and they want to sell seeds. It's like, wait a minute, I just saw you get that clone 3 months ago on the internet. Like, how could you possibly have run it, see what its traits were, bred it, and tested its progeny yet? Like, but you can tell.
A lot of that is back to the whole name game thing too, because people are trying to like plant their flag, where they're like, no, I'm the lava, gorilla, cookie, whatever. Everybody's got it's more about the name and less about the genetics, which is sad.
And some guys' packs will be $400, some guys' packs will be $800. But the problem with that is, those guys are probably doing the testing. They probably have the pictures to go with the flower. Like I keep going back to Exotic, but he's one of my, he's one of my top sellers. The guy's got 50 cups in 4 years. I don't think that'll ever happen again, ever. When he brings me a drop, I get a jar of each of the strands. That tells me he's grown them out. I have the lead in front of me of the seeds I'm about to sell, and so I know that they passed his test, and I'll get a list ahead of time, and I'm like, hey, what happened with this one and this one? He's like, this wasn't what I was looking for, I'm just not going to do it. And so when I get the drops from him, I know that he's running out. With Duke Diamond stuff, that guy writes the best descriptions on stuff. Like, you can tell that he's drawn them out, because the descriptions just tell you this is going to be short on calcium, it's going to have a problem with this. Week 6, look for that. And so when you're buying genetics, make sure that the guys are testing them and not just throwing shit together, and they can usually tell that with photos and descriptions.
I feel like, you know, as a cultivator and breeder, that finding that one male though that has that's like the one can really be huge, because that one male can potentially yield more profitability for a breeder
It's
than
the only thing that separates everybody.
Stud lead, pug.
Well, yeah, if it's
Wrap
a
around it.
female and it's out, the only way it's successful is if it's grown by lots and lots and lots of people. That's how it becomes successful.
Exactly, and then
And
you
with
have
males,
one.
you can't do that.
And nobody else has it, because you don't see a breeder being like, oh, this is my one, and then they give that out. But everybody
It gets
passes
asked for
around
all the time.
clones, like you were saying earlier. Everybody's had Blue Dream, everybody's grown Jack, everybody's grown out some cookies, you know, but
But
not
we're not all
everybody has
having fun.
access to that fucking badass male.
And most of the breeders won't give you their pollen. They'll laugh at you. They're like, oh, no, I'm not selling my pollen.
Yeah, I get asked all the time for that one, and that's like, I'll give you seeds, I'll give you cuts, I'm very open with genetics, but you're almost insulting me if you ask me for my male.
Well, it's also like you're kind of cheating at that. It's like buying your own dough, you know? It's like, come on, just make it yourself. You're gonna go buy the dough? You're not a real pizza place.
Right.
You're not making. So what else you got there for us?
So you were talking just on basic breeding, like you said, I in my line of business, I get the full spectrum. I get grandma who calls me and she wants to throw something next to her tomatoes, and I get the guys who have huge facilities and want to run something on a massive scale. So in breeding, when you guys are breeding, I know that, you know, Dunn's used this analogy of what's the easiest thing to start with, and I'll ask Dunn that question. If you had, you know, if somebody wants, I want to breed not because I want to make money, just because I like this and I like that, and I want to keep them around. So how should I start, and what would help me look for things?
So my suggestion is to start with polar opposites, because the problem is a lot of times people are breeding with things that are interrelated, which definitely doesn't help you recognize any kind of patterns. So just get like an extremely purple plant, an extremely green plant, start crossing those together, and it's just like you can basically see, hey, this one turned purple, this one was green, this one was purple and green. Amazing. Like it starts to create patterns in your technique and your growth. Whereas if you have two green plants that are sort of similar in flavor and smell, then you really can't see the difference when you do your crosses. You start to get really mixed up. So try to work with polar, and also F1 hybrids, which are very rare to find these days because there's a very far and few between for true completely separate plants. Like you have to travel the world to find these plants that haven't been contaminated by somebody else who coming there and telling them to grow, bringing them a pack of seeds and then ruining the local population. So true F1s are pretty hard, but in your own breeding, try to stay on the opposite ends of the spectrum if you can to start with.
And for some true F1s on our website, I plug, but we work with Indian Landrace Genetics. I raising.
Yep.
You've been in on the show, and he's a really good dude. Works over in India and whatnot. Sources the stuff from the actual farmers in the fields. Has it documented with books and everything. And so that's why I tell people when they're breeding with stuff is go back to a landrace. Find an old male, because when you as Dunn explains it, when you use that, you're like resetting your hard drive basically. You're getting rid of all of half of everything that plant was resistant to. When you breed it with a landrace male, now it no longer is resistant to. Now that plant's stronger. It's got things it didn't have before. And so you're resetting it, if you will. And when people want to grow these things too, I tell them your canopy should be 90% of what's paying the bills. You know, I've seen facilities that, you know, they like this cut and they want to look into something new. I'm like, hey, if that thing's paying your bill, I'd love to sell you more shit, but keep going with that. Use that to do it. But the other 10%, look into playing with some autos. Look into playing with some land races. Look into something different, just to, you know, keep it fresh in your garden. Maybe find something else that's fine, because you can afford to look for that other one. But 90% you have to pay for it.
I think one of the things that got me interested in breeding when I first started this was looking at different varieties that I liked and being like, hey, this would be really interesting to get this type of blueberry into this pine bud.
Under the plant, right? That way?
No.
Oh,
So
it's
you would
different.
just push the plant way past its flower
okay.
time, and
You
the
know what I'm talking about,
majority.
though? You know what I'm talking about?
Uh,
So he would take a lighter and put a lighter underneath it like this, and he claimed that would stimulate the plant to produce male flowers as a survival technique. And I was like, but little hard.
I feel that, bro.
What really it was just letting the flower go like well past its ripeness. And in nature, you know, you'll end up with a little banana flower. It's not like full on herms, but you'll have those little nanners in there.
They're potent.
And you pull those out with tweezers, and you might get, you know, a tiny amount of pollen on a Q-tip, and then you just go pollinate that other flower that you loved. And that's how that's how I started. I wasn't making seeds I didn't actually do a seed drop until I think 2019. It was just because there was so much demand for it. You know, all the stuff that I've been done was all private stock, things that I'm making for myself.
And on that note, like, I'm not here to crush anybody's dreams, but don't get into seeds and making breeding seeds because you want to make money on it. Like, there's not money in making seeds. Don't just do it because I want to make money, I want to be rich. No. The majority of the guys I work with on it, I try to work with the guys that originally did the main thing. They did it out of necessity. They did it because they needed something. They either needed to preserve the plant for next year. So one of my breeders, he got set up in the the late 70s. These guys showed him how to do it. He went, cropped, came back next year to get more seeds. They beat his ass. He was like, they're like, we gave you stuff that you should. If you wanted more seeds this year, you should have made more seeds last year. Like, we gave you good stuff that you've now lost. So we'll set you up again, but this is it. Don't come back again. You know, Matt Farmer.
It's literally self-preservation.
It's easy to make seeds, right? But the work that it actually requires to do proper selection and proper breeding is not something that most beginners have the capacity to do.
And really, you're going to waste a lot of your garden time. If you're just trying to get yourself good flower, you don't really want to be doing that. Like my coming making seeds with exotic genetics, summer sitting on about 50 strains, cookies and cream that I had hunted out. And I decided I'm going to hit everything because this crop's going to be crap, it's going to be warm, and I'm just going to make some seeds to lock this stuff in. And I didn't get into it to start breeding or selling seeds. I had thousands from all of that because I open pollinated 40-some females. And I started just giving them away, and getting feedback. And that kind of led me into my journey. And then I got into the issue of you can't use another guy's male. So that's led me to where I am. And when we go back to if somebody's pheno hunting or not, if you look at a seed company's garden, if 90% of the garden isn't their gear, run away. Just run away. At that point, if you're not standing behind your own gear, why are you doing it?
And in breeding, like I said, when you find a breed that you like, stick with them. But I have 70 different breeders. If they all did things the same way, I would only need one. Right? They all do things, they're all looking for something different. And like I said, Mad Farmer, he's got lupus, he goes, and I believe it too, when you look at Phylos, the galaxy is, horrible Phylos is, the purples cluster over here like Pluto. They're way the hell over there. There's something about the purples clustering so far away in the galaxy that I believe has medicinal properties and benefits. And that's what he breeds for. And so when you find a breeder and you find that the traits that they're looking for, stick with them. It's most likely you like something in that line, they're gonna have other things that you like in that line. They're gonna continue to go for those things.
Well, it's like all breeders have their own little personal experiments going on, right? Because they've been sort of doing their own selection. They've got their own thing happening, and that's why it's interesting just because you can go from each camp and see the different results and just see if it's like a key to is it a key to a lock or not? Sometimes some things just work. And I mean, when I come to shows like this, I always bring my own weed, right? And like all of us do. And it's sad because, you'll be trying other people's weed, and then you're like, I'm just gonna smoke my own joint. And then all of a sudden you smoke your own joint, oh yeah, it's back again. Because we just know what we like, we've attuned our systems to those things. And so by you getting seeds from us, you get a chance to sort of step into our world and see if you like what we like. And that's what's interesting, different, like Soma, for instance, you were saying, we used to call that the Soma aroma, right? He would walk in the room and, oh, it's the Soma aroma. And he liked sweet stuff, which was totally opposite of our spectrum that I was on. But he had his followers that like that kind of weed, and that's perfect because that's totally the opposite of what I'm doing. So, I think we create our own little worlds, and it's just nice when people can appreciate that.
And I think that goes for seeds too. I mean, of course, I don't love clones, but when you buy clones, I don't think you're guaranteed to get with somebody else's problems or bugs. With seeds, you get a rarity thing. With clones, you got one of how many did they sell of this? So when I bring it to market, I'm competing against 100 other growers that grew the same damn genetic that I have now. You can be the best grower in the world, but if your plant is only capable of doing 20%, then if you nail everything on the head, you're only going to get 20%. If your plant is capable of 35, you know, if we're talking cookies, your plant's capable of 50%, right? But if your plant has a greater genetic potential to start with, then you don't have to hit everything on the head. You can still walk away with a better plant. But you know, pheno hunting and starting from seed, that's the way you're going to get something rare that nobody else has. 2 dispensaries can build exactly the same building, do price wars all day. The only thing that will separate you is the strains on your shelf. And if you don't give it away, nobody else will have it.
And starting from seed, you automatically get yourself something unique. Even if other people have another one from the same batch, it's still got a slight different start. What you got?
Yeah, I think too, you know, if you're a cultivator, being able to set yourself apart, if you're a farm and you need to, you know, when you're in a legal setting, you need to have a way to brand and market yourself, and setting yourself apart from what other people have is really important. And so being able to find unique varieties that nobody else has, that can help differentiate you in saturated marketplaces.
Exactly. I mean, that is always the problem with, and clones have a lot of other inherent problems too. I mean, obviously disease and pests is a huge issue too. Dudding, which has happened all over the place, from HPLVD is happening now. Like,
Yeah, and all around that, yeah.
It's like, you really don't need to do, I mean, clones are great internally. Like, you definitely need to learn how to clone. You definitely need to be cloning. But when it comes to exchanging clones, you just have to really be extra careful.
It's almost like, it's almost kind of like that practice of exchange that was what kept a lot of these old varieties alive and still around. It's almost kind of going out the window. It's kind of like, nope, we can't do that, because now the scales that people are operating at, and now that it's all over, the pest pressure, the insect pathogens, it's just a more prevalent thing that could potentially ruin businesses, especially if they're unprepared or they don't have proper like integrated pest management SOPs in place. It can become a terrible nightmare.
Next one, drop the alpha. Hopefully we are all familiar with HLVD, the haploid latent viroid.
Yeah, hop latent viroid.
If you're not, please go look into it. It's been relayed to me from Dunn's brother, Mojave, who I take very serious. It's the worst thing in cannabis since prohibition. And I was like, damn, that's a heavy statement. But it is a very real deal. It's the name that we had for you know, when it duds on you, or it gets really brittle, or won't grow roots, or it starts losing its flavor. That's haploid viroid. It's easy to stop. It's very easy once you put SOPs in place, but it's so easy to transfer from one plant to another. It's as simple as topping 2 plants. Cutting the top off of this one and pinching the top off of that one. You just gave it to that plant.
And then everybody's like, no, it's cool. I soak all my stuff in alcohol. And you're like,
All you do is
alcohol,
serve it in
you're like,
alcohol.
alcohol doesn't work. It just spreads it around. You're like, oh, well, that's not a good thing either. So yeah, it's one of those, you know, unseen killers, and it's definitely ruined many gardens.
And it'll make them crazy because they can't figure out same process, same nutrients that the owner and the grower now find.
And well, the other problem too is that it can get into a situation where it's on a wave where you know you have it, then all of a sudden you kind of adjust for it, and you see, the plants seem to be doing pretty good. It's doing all right, and then it comes back again. So it's in there, and once you know it, you literally gotta cut and burn everything and start over, and that's really hard, especially if you've been out collecting genetics from people and you've got special things. You gotta just make that decision if you want to.
Because the only way to get rid of it is single tissue. A very single thing, which is a 4,000 process.
It's about $4,000, yeah. So
and there's a visible difference from growing a plant with hoploid viroid and without. Like I've had guys who are just like, dude, it's night and day. It's insane. And the thing is, we didn't just find it. It's not new. It's been here forever. It's the old timers dudding term. We're just now located.
It's also because of the way we're growing now. We're like, it's like how
it shows itself more in a commercial facility.
It was
where you push
what discovered in like 2008 or 18 or 19 by Dark Heart, right?
Yeah, it's always nice when you're the nursery that discovers it and you handed out thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of clones, and you're like, okay, so we're basically responsible for that. Funny enough is they're selling test kits now for it, so I was like, huh, okay.
Yeah,
Give you the disease. might charge you for the testing. No, but it's something where you really gotta, especially if you have a brand new garden, you gotta come in with fresh material, because that's like suicide right there, you know? You're setting yourself up with a Trojan horse from the day one, you know? You know, it's funny because every few years something new hits the market. Like, you know, there was a time when PM was our biggest enemy, right? Oh my God, PM.
Root aphids.
Or even mites. Like, mites have just, we laugh at mites now. Mites, I haven't seen, like my mom actually, it was pretty funny. We had some mites recently, and she's like, mites? I haven't seen mites in years, you know what I mean? It's just like, we're so used to not seeing them, and it was literally like, yep, I did the mistake. I took a clone, and sure enough, we got fucking aphids and mites off of that same fucking clone, you know? So it was just like, yeah, live and learn, you know, definitely.
All right, guys. Well, I totally appreciate everybody coming in for this. Looks like we're out of time.
Yeah, we're out of time.
We all have booths. You can step by my booth, catch Adam Dunn at his booth, Brandon's booth. We'll all be here for questions or whatnot. I appreciate everybody for coming out.
Also, the panel at 5 o'clock, we'll be back. Check something too. It won't be breeding. It'll be about internet marketing. What is it about? What are we doing?
Marketing yourself in the Oklahoma.
Adam Dunn Show.
Thank you.
Peace out.
A lot of valuable information right there. Thank y'all so much. Breeders Town. Up next we have the Legislation and Regulation of Oklahoma Cannabis panel. Everybody's here for that.